What I will try to do in this presentation is to demonstrate the rapid changing landscape of food and nutrition research funding in Africa. You have the funders landscape, which is already very complex, but there is an increasing expectation of private sector engagement. But I will focus on the African Union, European Union funder landscape and the consequences of new policies. But I will also highlight the future. So that's how the landscape looks like. It took me at least a decade to understand all those acronyms, all those funding opportunities. And for the last 15 years, the Forum of Agricultural Research in Africa is trying on a monthly basis to update and spread the news on what are all the funding opportunities coming up with all the deadlines. You may be most familiar with the nutrition-focused initiatives, which you see at the bottom. Now, all those international bilateral research institutes may have several cross-cutting teams on nutrition, sustainable food systems, climate resilience, gender, capacity building, policy. And the complexity of the needs is, of course, requiring more and more collaboration instead of fragmented funding opportunities. I have quickly analyzed two reports on private sector engagement, one from the International Institute of Nutrition Societies, which was about how and the conditions to engage with the private sector for attracting funding for IUNS activities or the annual conference. And when you contrast it with the FAO is giving a kind of strategy on how to engage, and the latest strategy was just published, the second strategy on the engagement of the FAO with the private sector, putting some, to caution us of engaging with multinational organizations or companies like Danone or Nestle, and putting some conditions of what it means to engage with the private sector, especially not only for attracting funding for core funding, but also for upscaling some initiatives. As I said, I want to focus on the European Union. So basically you have on the one side, DG, the Directorate General Research and Innovation, and on the other hand, DG, Directorate General International Partnerships, INTPA. And they have a different approach to research in Africa. INTPA would be more development-oriented, while DG Research and Innovation would be about research excellence. You see the trends in funding, it's increasing and then again decreasing, with a highlight in 2020. DESIRA was and is, because now we have DESIRA Plus, which is starting this year. And this is development-related research, mainly also priority on agroecology research in Africa. An interesting initiative funded by European Commission was the African Union Research Grant, which was only organized 2 or 3 times. What is remarkable, when the African Union did manage this research grant, is that 60% of the coordinators of research consortia were African institutes. While when you compare Framework Program 7, Horizon 2020, Horizon Europe, the majority of coordinators would be European research institutes. And this is due to the complexity of managing such a grant. What I want to highlight is the LEAP Agri. This was a common pot, basically, where funders from the north, Finland, Norway, Germany, Netherlands, Belgium, France, Spain, Portugal, and Turkey, have put their money in a basket together with the national research ministries of Uganda, Kenya, South Africa, Cameroon, Ghana, Burkina Faso, Senegal, Algeria, Egypt. And it was very interesting, but I would call it an experiment because in the implementation, it was very complex. Why? Because between the commitment of putting, for example, 1 million euros coming from Uganda, between the commitment and the long period of selection, which can easily take a year, reviewing, then making sure the consortium is getting in their accounts the budgets, the money, you would have issues of the national government not being able anymore what they committed to disburse as such to their researchers or national researchers involved in a consortium. So in the implementation, very complex. But 27 projects were selected and have now rolled out and have come to a close. So what has changed? We know, of course, that we are all under pressure now. We all have to make sure that we are protecting our budgets. We have to look for alternative funding sources with the dwindling landscape of bilateral and public funding. But it has as a consequence, and this is what I try to put in the column on what this means, is that we are now facing a situation where the partnership structures, what I mean by partnership structures is that multi-stakeholder consortia need to involve private sector, farm organizations, policymakers, and research. The partnership structure is coming into pressure because the donor is pressurizing research consortia to deliver, to quickly upscale, and involving many actors may make the life of a consortium coordinator very difficult. And there is always a risk involved when you involve many different actors from different backgrounds, which may not necessarily have the capacity to deliver on the research with the complexity of research, with work packages, activities, and then deadlines which have to be performed and accounting for the budgets. There was a report last year which has tried to analyze funding of the past 10 years. And again, you will be familiar with this, is that there is many delays and even inconsistencies in funding disbursements. Always I'm hearing the same complaint about limited private sector engagement, and also that the local infrastructure and market systems are failing, which makes scalability very difficult. It takes a long time for research outcome to have an impact. And here I want to mention a great example from Ghana. It is Ajinomoto Foundation has been funding for 3 years research on coming up with a formula for feed additives, which is called Cocoa Plus, which young mothers would mix to their maize porridge given to babies. 3 years of research concluded with an amazing product called Cocoa Plus. When you add it to boiled maize, it's like 25 grams. The impact on the child's mental cognitive growth is spectacular. But the research was the easiest. The most complex was to reach the market. It took at least 7 years before this product was available in small villages in Ghana, and the Ministry of Health involved into training nurses to understand malnutrition and to understand what the benefits could be of this research outcome, Cocoa Plus. In the report I just mentioned, you see new trends where more and more research is focusing from initially 10, 15 years ago into agricultural production or increasing agricultural production and diminishing agricultural loss. You are seeing more and more attention to nutrition, like plant-based value chains, cereal, legume value chains, and climate-smart crops, not only nutritious for man, human beings, but also for the soils. The future, there was a selection of 6 experts. The call was in September last year, and they have to come up with a report this month, which is going to highlight what you see in the left column, with some key highlights on priorities of topics for research. And this is going to lead to a roadmap. And the implementation for Africa, especially on agricultural research and food and nutrition security and sustainable agriculture, will be done through a platform which is called the African Union, European Union International Research Consortium Platform. And a number of working groups are going to start soon, which you can see in the left column. So I would say make sure you tune up with this development, because ideally, and not only ideally, I think it is urgent that agriculture research and nutrition research policymakers come together to, in this new trend of new interest of what is the impact of agricultural production on good nutrition, that this is taken on board by the functional working groups. And it is going to be managed by the Forum of Agricultural Research in Africa, FARA.